Thank you, choir. Thank you, Caesar. Thank you, church family. Good to see you guys today. So our series this month, Mission Trip Musings, when I started putting this together, I actually sat down and thought about the number of mission trips that I've gone on in my life. And I actually surprised myself when the number hit 10, and I'm like, I think there was still one more that I did somewhere, but I can't quite remember. One of the short ones, like the weekend ones, right? And I thought back, and I'm like, man, that's actually amazing that I've had the opportunity to do this so many different times. You know, my first mission trip was my senior year of high school, right after I graduated, and we went to Hong Kong to help with an evangelistic series. When the Pathfinders were doing global mission trips, I actually had the opportunity to go with the Pathfinders and do this. And I love that song, Nearer, My God, to Thee. Now, personally, I can't help but think of the Titanic when I think about that song. But what that does for me is it kind of gives me that thought of sometimes people don't know what they're asking for when they sing a song like that. Nearer, my God, to Thee. God, I want to be closer to you. I want to be near to you. I want to know your heart. And the thing is, though, is remember, when you are nearer to God, God will call you places and call you to things that you might not want to do. So I feel that you have to be careful with that, because the nearer you get to God, the more God's going to expect, as with any relationship. Honestly, if you had asked me in my high school, during my high school years, if I was going to go on over 10 mission trips in my lifetime, I would have told you, no way. There's no way that's going to happen. And now I'm looking back, and I'm not even done yet. I honestly thought when I was done with college, I was like, oh, that's the last mission trip I'm going to go on. And then God said, well, actually, hold on. But I have to say that one of my favorite mission trips, one of my favorite ones that I've done, and all of the mission trips I've done, has to be this last Peru trip. Now, that might sound interesting because, as you guys have heard before, there was a lot of stuff that went wrong on this trip. One of our young adults was in the hospital for several days, and it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was a scary thing. And we had a lot of real close calls on this trip that I've had on no other trip. However, there is one key difference that for me made this trip better than any other trip I've gone on. And that's because I got to bring my wife with me this time. That Cassie went on this mission trip with me, and I think it was her first, at the very least, her first mission trip like that. And it was great. It was amazing. I love sharing everything with her, my partner, my friend, my wife. I love sharing all of my experiences. And every trip I'd gone on, last year when I was in Peru, I was like, man, babe, I wish I could show you all of this amazing stuff. I wish I could show you these amazing places and these amazing things. And then this year I got to actually be like, hey, babe, I'm actually going to get to show you all of these amazing things and to do these amazing things together. And us doing this work together was incredible, for the most part, except for one little small thing, one little small detail that when I had this whole plan, I was able to get it to where she came with us on the trip and everything. One thing I didn't account for, and that is the fact that my wife is a daredevil. My wife likes thrills. My wife, as I've said before, my wife is high thrill, I am low thrill. I like my thrills fairly low, fairly mild. I'm not spicy at all. Mild thrill, please. I don't like heights. I don't like high speeds. I don't like a lot of those things, and she loves all of those things. We went to a place called Vinicunca. We went to the Rainbow Mountain, and the only way the main way to get up to the top of Vinicunca so you can take pictures is to ride on the back of a motorcycle. So you're taking all of my least favorite things and you are compiling them together into one horrific package. And Cass was so excited to do it. And then when I said, because last year I got out of it because there were a lot of people suffering from altitude sickness, and I stayed back to keep them okay. I stayed back to check on them. And people gave me the pass last year. But this year she looks at me and she goes, babe, you're not gonna miss out on Vinicunca, are you? You're not gonna miss out on this, are you? I didn't know what to say to that, so I just kind of like made noises, and I'm like, And my plan was to just find some way someone needed my help to avoid getting up on that mountain. Day comes, we're there at the base of Vinicunca. I'm looking for my wife. I thought she went to the restroom. I couldn't find her. Next thing I know, she'd already hopped on a motorcycle and she's already up there. And I knew that she was expecting to see me at the top. So I sighed and I said a phrase that you're going to hear in a minute here. I sighed. I'm like, okay, here we go. So I walk over to the line. I get in line. I try to get on the first motorcycle, and my hip actually cramps up. I'm not getting younger, you know. My hip actually cramps up, and I'm like, see, God, see, this is a sign. And they go, oh, no, sir, it's okay. We got a different motorcycle. This might be better. So they roll up with a different sure enough, a different motorcycle, and I hop on, and my hip's not cramping. So I'm like, well, there goes my last excuse. And next thing I know, I'm riding a motorcycle going up, and we go up, I think like 2,000, 3,000 feet on the motorcycle, like very quickly. I did not instantly enjoy it. I did not instantly become a speed fan. It did not happen. I just held on real tight with the Spanish that I had, explained to the driver, and apologized profusely to the driver for holding him so tight. He said, it's okay, it happens a lot. He's like, not necessarily by grown men, but it happens a lot. I might have been a first for him, but it's okay. And I get up to the top, and I'm going to tell you right now, the look on her face when she saw that I got to the top, it made it all worth it. At that moment, I'm like, what motorcycle, whatever, seeing how excited and happy she was that I was up there with her in this beautiful space meant the world to me. And I thought I was done. I'm like, oh boy, I did the Vinicunca, I did this, I'm done, I'm good. I don't have to do any other scary things for the rest of the trip. No, I was wrong. So we go to Machu Picchu, but instead of going to the normal places, because normally when we go to Machu Picchu, we'd walk around the village down in the bottom, and it's really nice. I'm like, oh boy, my wife's a big nerd. She's gonna love all this stuff. I'm gonna show her all these but no, we couldn't go to the bottom part because of our tickets. So we had to go to the Inca Trail instead. And I've got a video to show you right now. Hopefully it goes on, but I've got a video to show you that kind of gives you an explanation of what I actually did, what this Inca Trail actually is.
We're coming back from the Incan Bridge. For a lot of the trail, there's been no wall. Here's a preview. There's Adam. He loves me more than he hates this, was the exact quote. We've seen two hummingbirds having a conversation with each other, and we saw a giant bird that I couldn't identify. It was jumping out of the trees. It wasn't flying, it was just like whoop-bump, and it would whoop-bump to the next one. We've seen orchids and bromeliads and tons of different ferns. And it's an amazing, beautiful hike, and I love it. Look, it's so pretty. And there's rocks, and there's sheer drops off the cliffs everywhere. It's incredible.
How can I say no to that face? Like, it even said at the beginning of the trail, caution. Steep, caution, be careful, danger. And she's like, yes. And I'm like, no. And those drops, the video didn't do it justice, because there were some spots where like if I fell off, like it would have been, I might have bashed myself up on a couple trees and I'd probably be okay. The trees would probably catch me. But there were some places where it was basically 1,000-foot drop, like right off the side there. 3-4 feet wide the trail was. There was not a lot of room. I tried to stay as close to the mountain as possible. And that was the thought that went through my head. And honestly, that was the same thought that went through my head at Vinicunca. It's the same thought that I had there on the Inca Trail. Baby, I love you more than I hate this. And that should say something, because I hate this a lot. I do not want to be here right now, but I will go because that's where you are. And honestly, though, I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't have been surprised on taking her on this trip. This is nothing new. This has actually been the story of our lives, of her saying, no, we're going, and it might not be a place I'm comfortable. I'm like, you know what? All right, we're going. Before we even got married, she sat me down after we got engaged, and she says, I'm going to tell you something right now before we get married, and this will be a deal breaker for me if you say no. She says, Adam, we are not meant to live small lives. She's like, we're not just going to fade into the background. We are going to do big things in this world, and we're going to make big changes in this world, and we're going to do it together. And I need to know that you're on board with me for this. Now, I know that I won a lottery ticket. I won the lottery with my wife, and I know that she's the best thing that ever happened to me. So I looked her right in her eyes, and one of the most earnest, honest things I've ever said in my life is, yes, let's go. I didn't know what that would entail. I didn't know what that would mean. I didn't know where that would lead me. I just said yes, because she is worth it. And yeah, ever since then, I've been consistently pushed out of my comfort zones. Ever since then, I have had to do things that are very hard and very scary. And yes, more often than not, I have to say the refrain, I love you more than I hate this. But honestly, I wonder if that's what God is calling us to today. Let's pray. Father in heaven, Lord, you are the God that calls us out onto the waters. You are the God that calls us out into the storm. You are the God that calls us out into the highways and the byways to seek all that might be saved by your amazing love. And Lord, I just ask you to lead us where you will, to lead us to whom you will, to lead us how you will, regardless of our comfort. Speak, Lord. We're listening. Amen. So our text this morning, I have to say, is one of my favorite texts. It's probably like a pet verses of mine, ones that I happen to like. I actually went through and I looked through how many times I've preached about this passage in the last couple of years, and I've literally preached on this passage. This is like the third time in 2 years I preached on this passage specifically. And I thought to myself, ooh, I hope they're not getting tired of this. And then I'm like, they're probably not even remember the last couple of times, so it's okay. No shade, no shame. I had to look it up. I didn't remember either. It's all good. But this is one of my favorites because John chapter 6 has a lot going on in it. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of things that Jesus is doing. And I love the fact that Jesus is basically messing with his disciples through the entire chapter. It starts out with there's a feeding of the 5,000, and Jesus basically turns to the disciples, and there's a whole bunch of people that need to be fed, and Jesus is like, all right, so what are we going to do about this? And I don't think they had a pre-meeting about this. I don't think they had a committee set up that was prepared to take on that request, because the disciples look incredibly nervous as Jesus is like, all right, all these people are hungry. What are we going to do about it? This guy has a sack lunch is basically their answer. And then Jesus goes, all right, hold on to that thought. And Jesus takes it, he blesses it, and he passes it around, and he does something amazing that the disciples were not expecting. But before that, and it's funny because the text even says that Jesus already knew what he was going to do. He was just testing them a little bit. He was just kind of, I'd like to even say messing with them a little bit, because Jesus is like, all right, how are we going to do this? And they're like, Jesus, we have no idea how we're going to do this. And I think that there's an important reason why Jesus does that, because Jesus is like, yeah, absolutely. There's no way you guys right now with what you have could feed 5,000 people. But it's not just you. It's you and me. And so that even though I'm leading you into an awkward space, even though I'm leading you into an awkward situation, you are not alone in this. I am with you. And when I am here, things happen. And we move on. And then the disciples are waiting for Jesus, and Jesus is nowhere to be found. So they take out onto the water, a boat onto the water. And then the storm comes up, and then Jesus comes up to them walking on the water. Imagine many of them are experienced fishermen, some of them aren't, and they're all stuck in this boat together, and a storm comes up, and it seems like a pretty bad storm because everyone is scared, and they don't know what to do. And maybe some of them are like, man, Jesus, why did we follow you out here? Maybe like the people of Israel, did you lead us out here to die? Like, what is going on? Jesus, where are you? We don't see you, and the water is really rough right now. And then Jesus comes walking up, and they think it's a ghost, and they get terrified. And Jesus is like, don't be afraid. It's all right. It's me. Because even though Jesus led them out of their comfort zones and led them out into a place that was hard and was scary, Jesus was with them. And then Jesus starts talking. And then Jesus starts teaching. And in fact, it's interesting that he starts talking about being the bread of life, especially after that feeding of the 5,000 is so recent in memory. Maybe even the same crowd is hearing this message. The same crowd that he fed miraculously is now hearing this message about how Jesus is the bread of life. And if you want this life and this life eternal, you have to eat him in order to get this. And I'll say once, and I'll say 1,000 times, for us Christians on the other side of Easter, we take this without a second thought. And we're like, yeah, sure, you eat the Son of Man, you eat his flesh, you drink his blood, yeah, and then you live forever. And then the people outside the church are like, you're talking about vampires and zombies. That's what you're talking. Like, that sounds like cannibalism, and it sounds like vampires. It does not sound appealing at all. And those of us in the church are like, yeah, we're covered in the blood of Jesus. And everyone outside's like, whoa. Hold on a second. This sounds weird. Because without the context, it sounds really weird. So Jesus comes up in here and Jesus starts dropping some stuff. And Jesus is like, hey, you want to live forever, kids? Eat the Son of Man. Because my flesh is bread. My flesh is food. A lot of people he's talking to are good Jewish people. Good Jewish people who have some real sensibilities about things and some real ideas about things. Maybe not unlike our church people nowadays. They had ideas about how certain things should go and how certain things and what you believe and what you don't believe. And what he was saying sounded insane. So then in verse 66, what we see is it's not just the crowd that is turned off by this. It is not just the crowd that thinks that this is too much. This is weird. Whoa, dude, what are you even talking about? What are you pulling? What kind of cult are you getting us into right now? Because we have to remember that to the Jewish faith, early Christians would have looked like a cult. And a death cult at that. But it wasn't just the crowd that left. Verse 66 says this, at this point, many of his disciples turned away and deserted him. So remember, it wasn't just the 12. There were actually a lot of Jesus had the 12, and these are the ones that he specifically called. But then Jesus had a whole bunch of other people who were actually just like a bunch of groupies following him around and sitting at his feet and learning. And they were probably doing odd jobs for him. I would be surprised if they were traveling around and Jesus didn't have to worry about food in certain places because he had disciples that were like, hey, we're going to go out and get food for you and the 12. You guys stay here and keep doing what you're doing. We're support. We'll back you up. And after Jesus talks like this, despite the miracles that he did before, even the miracles weren't enough. After he talks like this, many of his disciples turn away and desert him. Leave him high and dry. Because they're like, ooh, this is too much, man. This is not comfortable. I don't know about this. I'm out. 67. Then Jesus turned to the 12. And this is why I love this passage so much. This is why it's one of my favorites, one of my pet passages, is I love the vulnerability of Jesus. Because you don't have to, I know it's text, but you don't have to read into this. You can tell how Jesus is feeling when he's asking this question. You know exactly what Jesus' emotional state is here. I really do not think that this is just some of him going, are you going to leave me also? That's not the vibe here. Are you going to leave me too? Jesus is wondering if the closest people to him on this planet are also going to desert him because it's too much, because he's too much for them, because they can't handle what he's saying. Many of us might feel like that sometimes, where we feel like we're too much. And we feel like, why do people seem to leave all the time? Why don't they stay? And I wonder if Jesus is feeling that in this moment, that fear of loneliness. Are you going to leave me too? And then Peter, Simon Peter, my boy Peter, comes in there and he goes, Lord, where else are we going to go? To whom would we go? Like, what other place can we go right now? You have the words that give eternal life. We have to remember, and I love looking at this because I love the fact that this chapter, we can look at it from different perspectives. And oftentimes I look at it from the Jesus perspective, but right now I actually want to look at it from the disciples' perspective and what they're doing, because they are not immune to this. They see what Jesus is saying. They see these things. They see everyone leaving. But unlike them, these 12 have given up everything to follow Jesus. They are all in. They've committed. And they're like, Jesus, all due respect, my guy, where else are we gonna go? Like, we've given up, as Peter says at one point in the gospel, we've given up everything to follow you. And guess what? The disciples don't always understand what Jesus is saying. Sometimes Jesus, he's talking and it goes right over their heads. Perhaps for them, this is nothing new. And they're like, yeah, Jesus, you put us through 5 uncomfortable situations yesterday. This is nothing new. Like, you already remember the feeding of the 5,000, and you asked us what we're going to do about it, and we had no idea, and we were panicking, and then you already had it figured out, and you could have just told us that from the beginning. We are with you. And perhaps what Peter is saying is, Jesus, we love you more than we hate this. Jesus, we love you more than this uncomfortable. We love you more than this situation where everyone's leaving and everyone's abandoning you. We love you more. We'll talk about what you were talking about. Maybe you can unpack what you were talking about and help us understand it better. But we're not going anywhere because we love you more than that. In John chapter 11, Lazarus is dying. And in fact, before Jesus gets there, Lazarus is dead. And when Jesus gets the news, if you remember the story, when Jesus gets the news, Jesus actually stays a couple days later in the place where he's at, intentionally, purposefully, so that by the time he gets to Bethany, Lazarus will have been dead for 4 days. And remember, this is very important for the resurrection, because 4 days the Jewish people are like, yeah, you're dead, you're real dead. And so Jesus is hanging out, and Jesus, for later than he should. Because if he had just come right away, as Mary and Martha tell him, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. If he had rolled up when he was supposed to, when they wanted him to show up, Lazarus would have been okay. So Jesus is hanging out with his disciples. And then finally he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. They said, Rabbi, only a few days ago the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? And notice how the disciples say that. Are you going there again? You know what's not being used there? Are we going there again? They're like, they just tried to kill you over there and you want to go back? I'm sure, have you ever had that before when a friend gives you an idea and it's a really crazy idea and you're like, but why though? Why are you doing this? And it's not we, it's you. This is your plan. This is your thing. If I'm rolling with you, I want to make sure we know that we're doing it because you're going, not because we're going. So the disciples are like, are you going to Judea again? And Jesus, I love Jesus' answer because he's like, it feels like he almost kind of derails, because he's like, you work during the daylight. There's 12 hours of daylight. You walk while it's day. You walk while you have the light of the world with you. And then at night, that's when you stumble. Right? I think what Jesus was actually saying is, what else would I do? Of course I'm going back. Of course I'm actually going. Of course where I am needed, I will be, even if the people there want to stone me. That doesn't matter. What matters is the work that I have been given. What matters is the love that I am supposed to share with this humanity that needs it. And my mission is what this is about. It's interesting in this story, because you know who often speaks up? It's usually Simon Peter that speaks up. Usually he's the first out there, right, with the bold statements and the declarations and the, I'll follow you anywhere, Jesus. And like, oh no, you're never going to die that death. Oh, you know, Peter's out there in the front. You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Simon Peter is usually the one at the forefront making these bold declarations about Jesus. Not this time. It's not Peter this time. It's one of the ones that I think usually hangs out near the back. It's the one, now granted his nickname was the twin, but then we also call him Doubting Thomas. And I imagine that in a lot of these group meetings and stuff like that, I imagine Thomas is kind of along for the ride, and Thomas is there, and Thomas has got questions, and Thomas has got doubts, and Thomas is a little cynical about some things, and everyone kind of just goes along with it. Oh, no, Thomas, that's just Thomas. Don't worry about him. We'll be fine. I realized recently that I think I have a lot more in common with Thomas than I do with Simon Peter. If you'd asked me when I was younger, I'd been like, oh, I'm a Simon Peter for sure. But no, the more I think about it, I'm like, oh no, Thomas and I, we resonate. He's asking the questions. He's like, how do we know the way, dude? He's like, what do you mean? I think he's the one with the feeding of the 5,000. He'd have piped up with, look, dude, we don't have any food. We're starving as it is. How are we supposed to feed 5,000 people? But here, Thomas speaks up. Thomas is the one that makes the declaration about Jesus. And what is his bold declaration about Jesus? What is his like rallying cry for the rest of the disciples? Like, he goes, all right, he says to his fellow disciples, let's go to and die with Jesus. That's Thomas's response. Not, oh, we'll follow you wherever you go. Oh, we'll walk into the mouth of hell for you, Jesus. No. He looks over at the other disciples and Thomas goes, oh, well, looks like we're dying too. Let's go. But I find something really beautiful about that. I find something really vulnerable, really raw, really beautiful about that, where Thomas is basically just like, look, I'm pretty sure how this is going to go, and it's not going to go well. But Jesus, you're not going, we're going. Jesus, you will not do this alone, because we will go with you, even if it's rough, even if it's hard, even if it's scary, even if it's uncomfortable. And Thomas makes it perfectly clear that he does not like this. The disciples make it perfectly clear that this does not sound like a good idea. But what they say to Jesus is what I said in Vinicunca. What they say to Jesus is what I said in Machu Picchu. What they say to Jesus is what I've said many, many times in my life. But you know what? I love you more than I hate this. I love you more than I hate this. I wonder if sometimes we're afraid of admitting that. I wonder if sometimes we're supposed to be like, oh, yes, Jesus, of course, anything. I'm happy, more than happy to do anything for you. But you know what? I think that it's, from what we see in Scripture, it's actually okay to not be. In fact, we see a parable of two sons, and one's asked to go out and work, and he says, yeah, Dad, of course I will, and he doesn't. And then the other one goes, oh, I'm not going to do that, and he does. And then Jesus is like, which one was actually better at the end? The one who said he wouldn't and did it anyways. It's okay to ask questions. Sometimes I ask my wife, are you sure you really want to go up on top of that mountain and ride a motorcycle? And she looks at me like I'm crazy, and she's like, of course I do. Okay, babe, okay. Babe, are you sure we can really afford a house? Are you sure we can really, you know all of our financial stuff. We can't get a house right now, 2015, I'm like, babe, we can't get a house. Like, that's insane. What do you even, why are we went in for a conventional loan and we literally got laughed at. Like, the guy was trying really hard not to, but it was there. He looked at our number, he was like, oh, yeah, okay. Babe, this isn't going to happen. And you know what? That road was hard. and it was long, and it asked me to do a lot of things and look at a lot of things because those numbers can be scary sometimes. I didn't want to do it, but I loved her more than I hated that. We're this year celebrating 10 years in our home. 10 years in a house that I never thought we'd be able to do. 10 years in our forever home. And I'm just eternally grateful that every time she's asked something of me, I've said, you know what, I don't like this. I'm not a fan, but I love you more than I hate this. I think it's interesting that sometimes we have a conception of what the Christian life is supposed to be. And everyone talks about, oh, you know, if you live a life with Christ, just bright and beautiful and nothing hurts and nothing's hard and everything's, you know, if you get baptized, it's like smooth sailing. Like, I'm like, I don't know who you're talking to about that. I don't know what text you're reading about that, but that's not my experience. And in fact, some people will come to me after they get baptized and like, Pastor, why does everything feel so much harder? Why does everything feel so much harder? Why is everything so much more difficult? Why am I having so much trouble when I wasn't having trouble before? And I tell them this, it's because you care now. It's because you care about a lot more stuff now. And you're noticing things more now. And you know what? The devil be trying. Because that's what the devil does. It doesn't get easier. Jesus never promises it will. Jesus leads his disciples out in the middle of the storm, semi-intentionally. Because on the other side of that is where he needs to be. And if you are a follower of Jesus, that is where we are bound to. It is not you are going to Judea. We are going to Judea. It is not you going into San Gabriel Valley. We are going into San Gabriel Valley. It is not you reaching that person at your work who obviously needs a friend and someone to talk to, even though they're a little off, a little weird. We are going to do that. Because Jesus will call us beyond our comfort zones. And I'm going to tell you right now, comfort zones are nice, but they are dangerous. Our comfort zones lull us into false security. If you're outside of your comfort zones and you're used to being outside of your comfort zones, it gets a lot harder to surprise you with stuff. When you're a little bit cynical, it's a lot harder to get hit with things out of the blue because you're like, well, I knew something was going to happen. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but here it is. I always tell people when I'm officiating a wedding, I hate to tell you this, guys, but something's going to go wrong during your ceremony. And people do not like hearing that. I'm like, I'm telling you this now. I'm telling you this now so that it does not blindside you and you freak out in the middle of the sermon. Something is going to go wrong. It's not a question of what. It's a question of what are we going to do about it. If you know it's coming, you can pivot. And honestly, that's something you gain by living outside of your comfort zone. When you're forced to be flexible, when you're forced to pivot, when you're forced to like come up with solutions on the spot, when you're used to, I don't know, everyone used to watch MacGyver back in the day, when you're used to having to like put together like your own things and all you've got is like PVC and a box of Bisquick and you're supposed to put something together from that. And somehow he always did. That's what Jesus calls us to do. But what Jesus tells us is we do not do that alone. Jesus does not call us out by ourselves into the awkwardness. Jesus does not call us out by ourselves outside of our comfort zones. Jesus goes with us. And this is the man that fed 5,000 people with a sack lunch. This is the man who walked on water. This is the man who raised people from the dead. This is the man who was raised from the dead. This is the man who is coming in the clouds of glory to raise all of us from the dead. That is the one that goes with you. So yes, it will be hard. Yes, it will be scary. And you might not like the thing you are doing. Trust the one who is sending you. Because there's a reason for it. You might not know it yet, but there's a reason he's putting you out there. You just got to trust him. And you just got to tell him those words. And honestly, maybe you will take this up as your cry too. This is not my rallying cry just with my wife, but this is also my rallying cry with God. A guy with a kid on the way, without a job, trying to figure out what he's going to do. And then his wife finally says the last thing, shouldn't you be a pastor? Why don't you try being a pastor? The last thing I wanted to be, by the way. And I went, fine, to her and to God, because I love them more than I hate this. And sure enough, I actually don't hate this. I love it. And it's funny because sometimes on the other side of it, you might actually turn around and you might actually be like, you know what? That wasn't so bad. Or you might turn around and go, you know what? I actually liked that. You know what? That was actually really cool. And I would never have experienced it if I had stayed in my comfort zone, on my couch, in my chair, in my space, in my place. I never would have noticed that. So that's what I want to challenge you with today, church family. I want you to ask God, and don't ask God unless you mean it. Don't ask God, because God will give it to you. Like, for example, if you ever pray for patience, God will send you things that test your patience. But if you're interested, say, God, send me wherever you will. Lead me, I will go. And don't be surprised if God takes you somewhere awkward. Don't be surprised if God takes you somewhere outside your comfort zone. But if he does, go. And trust him, because he's got you through it. And just remind yourself, when things get hard, I love you more than I hate this.